It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Something about neighbors, more about neighbors. Won't you be my... Hello, neighbors. How are we doing today? 60% of you on Facebook got it right. Hey, it is good to see you this morning. We are starting our brand new series today called Won't You Be My Neighbor? And we are shamelessly ripping off Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I actually learned something last week, which kind of blew me away. Not everybody knows who Mr. Rogers is. As a matter of fact, one of our younger Sunday morning attenders asked his dad, does Captain America, Mr. Rogers, does he have a TV show that I didn't know about? Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, by the way, if you don't know, I think we got a picture of him up here we can show you. Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I don't know how long the show ran. The first ones were in black and white. All right, and he ran through the 90s or the 2000s, so several decades of Mr. Rogers. And if you're not familiar with the show, the whole show was about helping kids feel valuable, deal with their emotions, and helping kids understand that their neighbors, the people around them, were just as valuable and just as important as they were. So it was a great show. If you saw the movie, Mr. Rogers, you kind of realized, hey, there's a lot behind this guy. It wasn't just a kid's show. Interesting guy and a wonderful person. And so, if you haven't seen it, I don't get any royalties. Shameless plug. Go see the movie. It's amazing. But anyway, it got me thinking about my neighborhood. Now, I don't know how you grew up. And one of the things that kids do, at least I think it's what kids do, we kind of assume whatever our normal is everybody else's normal because we don't know any different. And so I grew up in kind of what I now know was weird situation, but at the time I thought was everybody's situation. The house I grew up in, I lived in for 22 years, so I was there for a long time. And actually, that house, my dad bought from his dad, my grandfather. So he lived in that house even longer than I did. And the net result of that was we knew everybody. We knew everybody on our street, 15, 20 houses worth, both sides of the street, our side of the street, down all the way to the major streets. I mean, we knew everybody in our neighborhood. And so I just thought, well, that's normal. That's what happens when you live somewhere. And I can remember so many days playing in the backyard and my mom or my dad leaning. We had a short fence with our immediate next door neighbor to the north of us, as a little 3-4 foot high fence between the backyards. And it seemed like every day I would go out there and my mom or my dad is leaning on the fence talking to one of the Hills, Jack and Joe Hill, who lived next to us. And that was just normal life on 21st Drive in Central Phoenix when I grew up. And so I assumed that was just the way it was wherever you lived. And so when I got married and moved out, we moved into an apartment. And so I thought, well, this is great. We're going to have neighbors just like we had growing up. I never saw our next door apartment neighbor, until one night, and there had been a lot of yelling and banging, and the police came and hauled somebody away. That was the first time I got to see my neighbors. It's kind of like, well, okay, maybe not. One of them's going to be away for 3 to 5 years. And so it's going to be hard to develop a relationship there. And we didn't live there that long. And then we moved and we went to grad school and we got into student housing. And I thought, okay, well, other students, of course, man, we're just going to be hanging out and we're going to enjoy life. It's going to be great having these great neighbors. And we were in a duplex, which if you've never been in a duplex means it's a big house that has a wall down the middle that's shared. And then it's like 2 houses out of one. And we're living in this duplex and it's a single lady that lives in front of us. And the only reason I know this is because she's the only one I've ever seen go in and out, but we're on totally different schedules. So I never see her until kind of we got towards the end of our time at grad school. We had our firstborn, Marissa, and she let us know that, hey, congratulations, I hear you have a baby pretty much every night. Okay, great, good. And so far, no good on the neighbor thing. No good on my neighbor dreams. I'm trying to recreate the neighborhood I had as a child. But then we finally got a house. And I thought, well, maybe it'll be different in a house. It's not an apartment, it's not a duplex, it's a house. Maybe people are a little more established, a little more stable. Maybe this will be better. The problem was it was in Tucson, right? And so, fear the fort, go Devils. But it just, it's Tucson, right? I mean, that explains what I'm about to tell you because it's Tucson, all right? The first encounter I had with my neighbors in Tucson was people in Tucson flinging dog poop over the Tucson fence into my backyard, which we didn't have a dog and they did. So that's how they got rid of it in Tucson because it's Tucson. And so I didn't really get off to a great start with them either. And I had hoped that would be good. And then we came here. I thought maybe this time will be different. And the reality is, it's probably a lot like you. As a matter of fact, we did a little poll and we found out that like 70% of you guys know 1 or 2 of your neighbors based on how you responded. And I'm pretty much in the same boat. I wave at a few, I talk to 1 or 2. And the reality is my neighbors, your neighbors, they're busy. right? And most of what you see is the garage door go up, people go inside, and the garage door go down, and that's pretty much it. And so they got stuff going, you got stuff going, and you add on top of that, you don't really know much about them, you may not have much in common, and then probably one of you, or maybe them, maybe you, whoever, somebody's socially awkward, and it's kind of like, there's not gonna be a lot of neighboring going on. But it doesn't have to be that way. And that's what we're gonna be talking about for the next several weeks. And here's where this really struck me. It just struck me as really ironic and odd that, so in my house, that's where we eat and watch TV and hang out and play games and do all kinds of stuff and have friends over and family over. And we just do life in our house, right? And yet, depends on where you live. It may be just a shared wall. Maybe it's a few feet. Maybe it's a few yards, whatever it is. Depends on how big your house is and where you live, but everything else. But there's another wall not too far away. And behind that wall, there's a group of people doing the exact same things you're doing. They're eating and hanging out and doing stuff with family and friends, and they're playing games and they're doing life. And it just blows me away that why would we live so close but be so far and be so distant? I mean, why would we be so close in physical space and so far away when it comes to relationship? Because the reality is, you may not know this, the reality is those people are pretty much just like you. If you think about it, they live in the same city. They live on the same street. They probably have a similar lifestyle and similar background, and a lot of things are very similar to yours. And yet in many cases, though we're only separated by a few yards, it may as well be separated by 100 miles. We don't know them, we don't talk to them, we don't interact with them, and they don't interact with us. And we could go on that way. I mean, I suppose we could just go on, just kind of, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, and no big deal. But should we? Should we? You know, Jesus actually had something to say about this. And so we're going to spend today and the next several weeks kind of exploring what Jesus said about this idea of being a good neighbor. And so I hope that you'll not only be here for today, but throughout this series for the next several weeks, because what Jesus said about this is actually super, super simple, but it's really genius. And the way we're going to kind of introduce it is, if you've got a Bible or you're in the app or whatever, we're in Luke chapter 10. And in Luke chapter 10, let me kind of set the scene for you. Jesus has been teaching. And if you don't know this, if you're new to the Bible or new to Jesus, anytime Jesus kind of sat down and taught, it seemed like a crowd just gathered around him. And it was spontaneous. I mean, he wasn't organizing and he didn't have social media and all this other stuff. It was just like, people just knew he had something important to say. And he would sit down and start talking, and before you know it, 5, 10, 20, 40, 100, 200, 300, sometimes several thousand people are gathered around because they want to hear what he has to say, because every time he talks, people walk away going, hadn't thought about that, didn't realize that. I didn't know that about God. I didn't know that about me. I didn't know that. I'd never really thought about that. And so Jesus is talking, and he's been sharing, and he's been teaching, and I'm assuming it's just like every other time. I mean, the crowds are kind of listening and amazed, and as he's talking, they're probably talking to each other. Have you ever heard that before? No, I know. How could he say that? I don't know. I mean, all this is going on, and then he starts wrapping up. And you guys know when somebody's starting to wrap up, they're getting ready to go, or it's time, like, well, okay, I got to get going. It's that kind of a thing. He's finishing up, and then this guy interrupts him, and that's where we're going to jump in. So if you've got your Bible, Luke chapter 10, verse 25. It says this, on one occasion, an expert in the law, and some of you may say lawyer, and it doesn't mean the kind of lawyer that we have. It means somebody that studied the religious law and was considered an expert, like they really knew it, they really understood it. So an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. So he doesn't have the greatest motives, okay? He's kind of coming with an agenda. So Jesus, get this in your mind. Jesus finished speaking. The guy stands up. He stands up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? He replied. How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You've answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Stop there for a minute. Kind of try to get this in your mind. And I know if you didn't live 2,000 years ago and you're not Middle Eastern and Jewish and all that other stuff, but try to get this in your mind. So Jesus is there and there's a lot of people gathered around and he's teaching them and he's finishing up and everybody knows it. And this guy stands up, which is kind of odd. Usually if somebody's trying to leave, if somebody's done, polite, you let them go. They're done. They need to go. But he doesn't want that. He wants some kind of moment. And we don't really know what his agenda is, but we do know he's got an agenda. And so this guy, he stands up. So it's hard to miss. And my guess is, based on his description, he's probably wealthy. He's well educated for sure. He's probably well known. Most of the people in the crowd probably looked over as soon as he stood up and said, oh yeah, there's so-and-so. What's he doing? They knew who he was. They knew what he was about. They knew what he did for a living. They knew of him. And he's looking for this kind of mic drop moment, right? You know, like I don't know what his agenda is, but like I said, he's definitely got one. And without saying it, what he says is, hey, Jesus, hey, really good job today. Really appreciated what you had to say. That was great stuff. But how do I inherit eternal life? And he kind of backs up like he's waiting for this big, stupendous reveal that somehow it's going to show him as being really smart, or it's going to embarrass Jesus or something like that. And I believe, I really do. I believe Jesus loved this guy. And I think he didn't want to embarrass him. And so he kind of went with it. Jesus knew who this guy was. And in essence, Jesus kind of said, well, you're the expert. You're the one that studies the law. What do you think? How do you read it? He didn't even answer the question. He basically just turned it around and said, well, what do you think? And the guy goes on and he gives an answer, and it's a standard answer. I mean, again, I know you're maybe not from that culture, that situation. This is a normal answer for a normal Jewish person. Any little Jewish boy or Jewish girl could have given this same answer. Yeah, we love God with everything we have. We love our neighbors ourselves. And so he gives that answer just like he's supposed to. And again, I said how Jesus doesn't want to embarrass him. I think Jesus is trying to protect him a little bit. And he says, you know what? You're right. Just go and do that, which is really good advice. Just go and do that. That's all, right? Just love God with everything you have. Love your neighbors yourself. If you can do that, you don't have to worry about anything. But he wasn't done. He didn't get his moment, right? And I apologize if this was you. This was me a little bit in school, so I understand. But he was a little kid. He's like the little kid that every time the teacher asks a question, he wants to raise his hand first, And every time the teacher calls on him, he's right. And everybody else is a little annoyed that these guy's so smart and you don't like that guy. And that's who this guy is. And so he kind of said, okay, well, wait, I didn't get my moment earlier. Maybe I can get it now. And so Jesus says, okay, go and do that and live. And he says, okay, well, wait a minute, Jesus. Okay, then, who is my neighbor? Like it's this really deep question. And we kind of told he's trying to justify himself. He's trying to save himself. He didn't get his moment. And so maybe if he can put Jesus on the spot, which is really crazy because think about this, and I know I'm the only one that thinks this way. He just said, I'm supposed to love my neighbor as myself, and now he's trying to embarrass and get a moment from his neighbor at his neighbor's expense, Jesus. He just said, I'm supposed to love my neighbor as myself, and the way I'm gonna do this is by embarrassing you, my neighbor, and trying to steal from you. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. But the question, who is my neighbor? Where does that come from? What is he after? You see, he was looking for a loophole. He knew the answer. This wasn't like he was confused. He knew the answer. He just didn't want to do the answer, right? He knew it. And this is all of us. This isn't a Bible thing or whatever else. This is a people thing, right? There's times we know the answer. We still want to do the answer. How do I lose weight? We know the answer, but I want to eat pizza. How do I save money? We know the answer, but I want to go to the movies. We know the answer. It's the same way. This guy knows the answer. He knew the answer. He just didn't want to do the answer. But before you're too hard on him, you see, he had grown up in a system where he was told who his neighbor was. See, the Jewish people had decided, they all knew this. Love your neighbors yourself. Oh yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. We're God's special people. We're supposed to follow God's directions, what God laid out. We know that. But this whole love your neighbor thing, that's kind of hard. So they came up with a loophole. They went ahead and divided people into buckets. There were those people and these people. Those people were the people that had different morals, that had different politics, that had a different social standing, that didn't see the world the way they did, that didn't believe the way they did, that didn't do the things they did. That was those people. And let's be honest, those people aren't our neighbors. We'll have to love them. They're those people. And then there were these people. These people are people just like us. These people are people that believe what we believe, that act like we act, that do what we do, that spend their money the way we spend our money, that do morality the same way we do morality, that live like we do. Those are these people. And these people are our neighbors. So we will love the people that are just like us. And the people that aren't just like us are those people. And they're not our neighbors. Therefore, we don't have to love them. And that's the way this guy was brought up. So what he was doing in essence was asking Jesus, look, right, you're on board with our exclusions, right? I mean, you understand this whole neighbor thing. I mean, yeah, it's literal, but it's not really literal. I mean, it's literal for these people, but it's not literal for those people, right? And that's what he was asking. And before you're too hard on him, or before you're too hard on the Jewish people, don't we see that all the time? I mean, I do. I see it in our society everywhere. It's kind of like, if you agree with me, if you approve of me, if you celebrate me, then you're on my side and you're one of these people. You're with me. But if you don't agree with me and you don't approve of me and you don't celebrate me and my choices, then you're one of those people. You're not my neighbor because you're not like me and you don't support me. And we kind of quickly divide people into groups, don't we? There's these people and there's those people. And these people I love and I get along with and they're like me and they think like me and behave like me and do like me. And then there's those people that don't. And they're not my neighbors. And if you're a follower of Jesus, sometimes if you're not careful, you give yourself permission to not love those people because they're not like these people. And he's asking Jesus this question. And the reality is sometimes, and I'm going to be hard on us for just a second, okay? If you're a follower of Jesus, sometimes the way we do the these and those is we just isolate ourselves. I'm just going to make sure that my life is enveloped in this Christian subculture so that I'm never around those people. So of course I love all my neighbors because all my neighbors are just like me. And all of these people are just like me people. And so I love these people because they're like me people. And I've just surrounded myself and made sure that I never have contact with those people. So yes, I love my neighbors. And that's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. I'm not saying we shouldn't be careful about our friends and who we marry and where our kids are and all those kind of. Of course we do. Of course you got to pay attention to that kind of stuff. But if we're not careful, sometimes we can be just as divisive as this guy wanted to be in separating people into these that are my neighbors and those that are not. And so he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? And Jesus is going to give a response to that. He's not actually going to answer the question. He's going to give a response to that, but you're going to have to come back for season 1, episode 6, because we're going to do that at the end of the series, all right? So you need to come back for the last week of the series for sure to hear Jesus' response to his question. But before we get into that, I think it's worth thinking about who is my neighbor. And there's a couple practical things, and then there's a couple of actually very heart things that come out of this question, who is my neighbor? And so for the first part of it, it's very straightforward. Who is my neighbor? Well, the word neighbor, and we talked about this last week if you were with us, the word neighbor is very specific, actually. It's not the general, everybody is my neighbor, because sometimes we think that way, right? If you're a follower of Jesus and you're trying to do it right and you want to do what Jesus said and you want to follow him, it's like, love your neighbors. Okay, everybody's my neighbor. I love everybody. Problem is, when we love everybody, most of the time we love nobody, right? I mean, I'm just going to be nice to everybody and I'll kind of check that box. That's not really what this word means. This word is actually fairly specific. It means those that live near you, those that are around you. And so for most of us, I mean, I know everybody's situation is a little bit different, but for most of us, when it says who's my neighbor, and that word neighbor is very, very clear, it means, well, the people that live by me, the people that, work next to me in the shop or next to me, have a desk next to mine or a cube next to mine or whatever it might be. And if you're a student, the people that have the locker next to my locker, I mean, it means those people that are in close proximity to your life on a regular basis. Of course you want to be nice to the clerk and the person at the store and somebody you bump into, of course. But when he says love your neighbor, he's talking about, are you loving the people that live in very close proximity that you rub shoulders with all the time? Those people that, like I said, live near you, work near you, go to school with you, those people, those are your neighbors. And so when he says, who is my neighbor? The word neighbor means the people that you're tight with, the people that you're close to, the people that surround your life in whatever areas you go. So that's what he means when he says, who is my neighbor? When he says, love my neighbor, what does love really mean? Again, and we talked a little bit about this last week. Love at the very least means for. I am for my neighbor. And what that means is I'm in their corner. I want what's best for them. It doesn't mean I agree with everything they're doing. It doesn't mean that we're on the same page about everything. It just means I want what's best for them because, and here's the key word, I value them. They're important. It matters to me what happens to them. I want them to have a great family. I want them to be successful in their job. I want them to have peace in their life. I want them to have financial stability. I want them to have good health. I am for them, right? I'm in their corner. And not just for them that I'm in their corner, but I'm actually trying to help them accomplish those things. That's what it means to be for them. But what does it mean to be against them? That's a tough question. Because so many times, I know for me, and I'm not gonna assume that you do this, but I know for me, I think if I'm not being against somebody, that I am being for them, right? If I'm just kind of neutral in the middle, well, I'm really for you. I'm doing it, right? I'm on your side, I'm on your team. The reality is, for me anyway, a lot of times if I say neutral, what I mean is I'm just kind of ignoring. Right? They're out there, they're doing stuff. I know they're having struggles, or I know they're doing well, or whatever the situation might be, but I've just kind of become indifferent. Like, hey, good for you, thumbs up, or oh, that's too bad, I'm sorry. And I just kind of go on. But for me, that's actually a lot closer to against than it is for. See, for is proactive. For is me doing. For is me thinking. For is me considering. For is me taking action. Against is me ignoring, shrugging my shoulders, writing them off, sometimes because I think they're foolish, sometimes because I'm just indifferent to them, sometimes because I think, well, they're so messed up and their life is so jacked up, I don't even want to get involved because, it's going to take me down a bad road and I don't have time for that. And there's a big difference between being for somebody and being against somebody. So my neighbors are the people that are around me, the people I do life with. And if I'm going to love them, I have to be for them. I have to be in their corner. And here's what I discovered about this, because this is something I personally have been wrestling with. I know the answer. I just don't always do the answer, right? This is a heart versus head thing. And maybe I'm the only one like this, but I know what I'm supposed to do, and I know what my life is supposed to look like. The real challenge isn't knowing, it isn't finding out more information. And maybe if you're here for the first time, or you're kind of checking out this Jesus thing, maybe this is the first time you've heard that. And so this is good. I'm glad you're getting this information. But the reality is, most of the time, it's not information that does something in our life. It's inspiration that happens in our heart that does something in our life. And the only way that this whole thing of Jesus' commending the answer to love your neighbor as yourself, the only way this actually plays out is if it impacts our heart. Because if it stays in our head, it'll stay there as long as it's convenient. It'll stay there as long as we're kind of iron willing and gritting our teeth and making ourselves do it. But it won't last very long. The only way it lasts is if it's something that happens in our heart. And when it happens in our heart, it begins to change the way we do life. And again, I'm gonna share with you, I appreciate you bearing with me. I'll share with you kind of my own journey. Because like I said, I've lived in this neighborhood that I'm in now for a while. And I wish it was different, I really do. I have not done a great job, to be honest with you, of being for my neighbors. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm nice to them, and I'll help the older lady across the street move the dresser in her house, and I'll help the guy pull in his dumpster when it's too full or whatever, and I do those kinds of things. I want to be helpful, I want to be pleasant. I haven't really been for them. And the truth is, I want them to come to know who Jesus is. And my heart is that they would become followers of Jesus, not because I feel like I need to convert them to my way of life, but because I know that them being reconciled to God is actually the very best thing for them. And I want that for them. But the truth is, it's been one priority among many. Got a lot of stuff I'm doing, got a lot of places I'm going, got a lot of things my family's involved in, and without necessarily wanting it to be the case has become very Brett-centric, with a little bit left over to kind of be nice to my neighbors. But I'm confronted with Jesus saying, this is the whole deal. Love God with everything you have, and love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, it's not a suggestion. It's not kind of like, well, this may be a good way to improve your life. I mean, he was pretty straightforward about it. And when I'm confronted with that and I look at my own situation, I'm like, man, I haven't done that. I'm not doing that. I'm not living what he said to do. But I say that I'm following Jesus, and I'm not. And so I started trying in my neighborhood a couple months ago. And I'll be honest with you, it's been really, really slow. is really slow because my neighbors are like your neighbors. They don't have a lot of time, and they assume that if somebody's talking to them, they either want something, they're selling something, or they're weird, right? I mean, that's kind of like, okay. And so you got to break through that. And here's what I'm finding as I'm trying to be for my neighbors, that more than anything, God is changing my heart. I wish I could tell you my neighborhood is completely different. Just been a couple of weeks and everything, everything's different and people skip down the street and they love each other and everybody's in everybody's house. It's like, it's not like that. It's just like it was. But my heart is starting to change. God is beginning to burden my heart to be burdened for my neighbors. And when I do get a chance to talk to them, I want to know how their job's going. And when I do get a chance to see them out in the yard and playing with their kids, I want to know how their kid's doing at school. How their family life is. And not in a creepy way, and I'm not trying to worm my way in, but just, how you doing? What have you been up to? You wanna come by? You wanna go to a movie? And it's amazing to see how people do start to respond. Now they're hesitant, they're careful, they're not sure, and not everybody's been real positive. I mean, we got some strange looks when we went caroling last month, but I can tell it's starting to change. But like I said, more than that, what's changing is my heart. And so as a church, I want to ask you, selfishly, I guess, because this is a journey I'm on, would you come with me? Would you consider your neighborhood, your neighbors, the people that live near you, the people you rub shoulders with, whether it's the house that's a few yards away or the desk that's a few feet away or the locker that's right next to yours, would you consider becoming for your neighbors? Now, I know that for a lot of us, we are. We are for our neighbors. I mean, it's like me. It's one priority among many. We want to see them do well. We want to see great things happen. But the truth is, we don't always know how. And we are busy. And it's like, I don't know that I can completely redirect my life. And that's not what I'm talking about. It's not what I'm talking about at all. Jesus had a very ingenious and very simple solution to all of this. We say, love your neighbors as yourself. Just be for them the way you're for you. Just think about them the way you think about you. None of the qualifications, well, if they and if they're these people or those people are not, no. If there are people around me that I rub shoulders with, I want to be for them. I'm going to value them. I want to consider them. I want to see good things happen for them. I want to, when I have opportunity and it makes sense, I want to point them to God. I want them to see who God is. I want to tell that God story, because here's the truth. If you love God with everything you have and you love your neighbor as yourself, it's just going to be a matter of time before you have opportunities to talk with your neighbor and share your story, which is really God's story of what he's done in your life. And not in a weird salesman-y kind of way, but in a very authentic way. This is why my life is different, and maybe you need that too. You'll have that opportunity. But again, and I'm fumbling through this too, I think for a lot of us, we got that heart. We just don't know really how to do it. And so I want to give you a challenge. You got a card on your seat. I want everybody to grab this. And I know, you think I don't know. I know when we put cards on the seat, a lot of times you casually slide them over to the next seat. Well, I got mine. I don't know, that's my neighbor's card. Or some of you go a little further. You take it with you and set it on the table in the back on your way out. Like, okay, I got my card. Some of you tuck it in your Bible and leave it there forever. I'm asking you to do something a little bit different with this card. It's really simple. It's got a slot for 4 names. I want to challenge you. Would you be for 4 neighbors? And you're not committing to anything yet. You're just committing to, would you be willing to learn their name? For a lot of us, we just found out only 70% of us only know 1 or 2 of our neighbors. So this is a big step already to just say, I want to get to know at least 4 of my neighbors. I know 1 or 2. Can I double that? Can I get to 4? And then very simply, once I know their name, could I write down something I know about them? Have 3 kids, works at American Express, whatever it might be. Just write down something you know about them. And then the last one, probably the most important one, how I can pray for them. Because if I know my neighbor's name and I know a little bit about their life and I start praying for them on a regular basis, I'm gonna be for them. I'm gonna be for them. I can't help it. I'm bringing them before the Father and I'm talking to God about my neighbor. It's just, my heart's gonna change. There's no way around it. And would you take this card? And I know, because I can't fill out all 4 right now. I can fill out 3 names, but I can't fill out the 4th. So I'm not asking you to have this done tonight. I'm asking you, would you be willing to work on this, get it this year? This year. To put this card somewhere where you'll see it, refrigerator, dashboard of your car, underneath the garage door clicker, you know what I mean? Put it somewhere where you're gonna see it on a regular basis, and just try to start filling it in as best you can. So that when you see it, it reminds you to do two things. For the blanks, I'm gonna see if I can fill them in, and for the ones that I've got filled in, it's gonna remind me to pray for my neighbor. It's God, I'm for my neighbor, and God, I'm praying for Steve. I know he's had a struggle at work. And so God, I pray that you'd bless him with success at work. Because God, I want to be for Steve. Here's what I believe. If our church does this, it's going to take time. It is. But I believe God's going to change you. He's going to change your heart. And it's going to just be a matter of time before things change with your neighbors. Whether it's the people you work with, people you go to school with, people who live next to your house. And so this isn't a campaign, this isn't a series, this isn't a slogan. This is something we're gonna do throughout the course of all of 2020 and hopefully even beyond that. As a church, we're gonna continue to provide you opportunities and activities and ideas about how you can be for your neighbor. Things you can invite them to, things you can do with them and for them, ways we can help you, resources we can provide, so that if you've got an idea and if you've got a heart to do something with or for your neighbor and it's a little bit bigger than what you can pull off on your own, hey, we wanna help. Your small group wants to help. Our church family wants to help. So you're gonna have plenty of support, but I'm asking you to take this card, not push it over, not leave it on the back table, not just bury it in your Bible, but actually start to fill it out. Put it somewhere where you're gonna see it. Because we'll talk about this over the next several weeks, of course, as we do this series. But my hope is that it becomes a regular part of our church family when we talk about our neighbors and we talk about the four that we're for. That we begin to pray that way, that we begin to think that way, that we begin to live that way. Not because we have to, not because it's a good idea, not because we just want good neighborhoods. And honestly, not even because Jesus said we should, but because we see how God has loved us. And we can't help but love our neighbors because our heart has changed. I hope that's where you're at. I hope that that's how God is speaking to you today. And even if you're skeptical this morning, because I know I would be. If I was sitting where you are, I'd be like, oh, it's kind of a good idea, but we got to go to lunch. And then, I forgot. I get it. I do. I get it. But maybe the people that you go to school with, and the people that you work with, and the people that do life a few yards away from where you do life, it's not really maybe. They desperately need a follower of Jesus in their life that's willing to be for them. And my guess is God wants you to be that person. So why not start by simply getting some names and a little bit of information and to begin to pray for them? Let me pray for you.